There's no unsweet tea in the building.
What's that? There's no what?
There's no unsweet tea in the building.
There's no unsweet tea in the building.
Okay, take up with our meeting manager. Let's all email, oh my goodness, what's? Monica, all at once.
Sweet tea, no.
Unsweet.
Unsweetened tea. Okay, so one thing that you may have thought about was, gee, those answers people gave in Modesto seem awfully obvious. I mean, homelessness, okay, so we could see there's a homeless problem. Drug abuse, violence, oh, we read the paper this morning, didn't we? Or, you know, the point isn't really how obvious the answers are. The point is to draw it out of a person so that they say what the three most pressing problems are. And then they're the ones who give you an idea as to what they think would be a good solution. What are you doing in that moment when you ask them about the most pressing problems and you ask them to put forward a possible solution? What happens in that moment in the conversation?
To get involved.
They begin to own it. They begin to say, oh, yeah, okay, these are three problems. And as a leader, they're beginning to posit solutions. So you're turning the conversation at that point from what seems like just a series of pretty good questions to an engagement. See, you're discovering what their internal motivation is, and you're seeking to engage them in a longer-term process. And then, when you get to the end of the conversation and you wait until you get to that part, you ask them if they would be willing to collaborate with others to find out what's currently being done in the community so that they can take their solutions and hear what other solutions are and what people who are trying to solve the problem really are doing. And then they can use their analytical faculties in that process, then once they get involved, to say, okay, where are the gaps in our current solution process? And if you've got Reggie or me working with you, we'll also help identify some best practice communities and maybe other kind of folks like us. There are others who work with communities like yours and help point out some of those best practices out there that could be valuable for you to look at. We don't ever say imitate another community's solution because you have your own context. We say, though, emulate. That means take a look at how they got to that solution and use similar steps in discovering what will work in your context. So you might borrow some features of it, but you probably don't want to just take it wholesale and as though it were a McDonald's franchise and just apply it in your community. Are there thoughts or questions here? Reggie, I'm going to invite you.
A couple of things that I would just reemphasize or emphasize, whatever. Just like in Tracy's situation, as you engage community leaders, you're looking for not just their identification of the problems, you're looking for where the energy is. Who wants to actually do something about it? And that's why that motivation question, what do you think? What are you interested in doing something about? Because the Spirit is already speaking. See, the church is a subset of kingdom activity, not the other way around. So God's kingdom is being prosecuted across every one of these domains.
That's right.
There are people who are active agents, kingdom agents in law enforcement, in hospital administration, in schoolrooms, no matter how much we vilify, whatever. God's got his people, and he's whispering all the time a preferred future, because that's life as he intends. So when we access what their hopes and dreams are, to the point that Glenn was saying, what you're hearing is what the Spirit is saying to them.
That's right.
In fact, I ask people oftentimes, what are your hopes? Even let's just say instead of that opening salvo, you don't want to go to hell, do you? Or that you need to accept Jesus. My questions now are, what are your hopes and dreams to start those spiritual conversations? But then where do you think those come from? I mean, if we just, I guess if we were just creatures that climbed out of the primordial ooze, I don't think we'd be dreaming about a better world. Those ideas in us are echoes of the kingdom. They are homing devices, I think, that God puts in us to draw us to the kingdom. And so when you're having this conversation, you're having a kingdom conversation with the leaders of your community. The second thing that I would also emphasize is something that I've forgotten, and so I can't tell you. All right. I said there were two things I was going to say, and then
Just, did everybody get one of these?
Yes.
Yes, we have a-
If you didn't get it, Angela has.
thank you for reminding me of the second thing. I don't care about this article. Because I've read it, but that's a very good article. You've got it somewhere. Angela's putting it out. I almost forgot it again.
How about the question?
When you think, or if you think that leaders won't give you their time, we were discussing at our table a little bit, it is irresistible to say to someone, it's practically irresistible. We see you as a leader in our town, we'd like to have your opinion on something. I can tell you, no one shies away from having their chance to say, I mean, if you think it's going to be hard to get in to see people, that line will work. Because, and not from a bad, because you are interested. I mean, it's the truth. But they, then if they press you ahead of time, say, no, we're not going to, you want to give them cover too, because they want to be honest with you. And you may have to say, we're not publishing. We will aggregate answers that people give to us, but you're not going to read about this in tomorrow's paper. You said that because you want them to be honest with you, and you've got to protect them at that point, because that's really critical. All right. Now, as you probably begin to connect the dots, what we're trying to do is build some competency and confidence in you that you can call the party that make a kingdom difference in your community. And let's just make an assumption that you've had some conversations with leaders and you've gotten some feedback and you're beginning to hone in. Now, some of you came here already with, the issue that you want to work on, so out of Melbourne. By the way, you're not honor bound or committed or whatever. As you have conversations with folks, that can change. Or you may figure out there's this particular aspect of the homelessness crisis that you want to address. You're not locked in. I mean, keep up. That's one thing about just keeping yourself open to what you're going to learn from leaders as you talk to them. Yes, ma'am.
And by the way, Melbourne Cohort is all about North River and South River, and we have here a representation of South and North River. So we would like to call it River Camp.
No, you can't do that.
Why not?
Just because you think you can do something doesn't mean.
But I will do it.
Well, let me just tell you. We're going to appoint a study committee to look at this issue and bring back a recommendation in 6 months. And then we'll
Too late for me.
You just sound like a leader.
I recommend east and west instead of north and south, because everything on the west is just swamp.
Okay.
If you're going to go changing stuff, get it right. I mean, why swap one wrong thing for another? All right,
Well, we
so.
want to swap our telephone. Leon gets to walk over.
Who else wants to change who they are here? I would love to change who I am. As a matter of fact, I'm my worst change agent. Yeah.
Are
Well,
you
you
not
got,
buying?
no, don't. No. You've had too much something. Not this group. All right, so.
I'm changing my topic.
Thank you. All right, there you go. You can call yourself whatever you desire, but we sure want to honor that. Now, let's assume that you've gotten some feedback. I mean, some distant future in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to use some language that we're borrowing wholesale from the Stanford School on collective impact, which really has given a language, a framework for city leaders and community leaders who want to have significant results. They've given us some good thoughts, so I'm going to do some work on that this afternoon with you and then finish up in the morning. But they talk about preconditions. In other words, just because you have the idea now, just because you may have a beat on a topic or whatever else, there's certain things you better have in place if you have a snowball's chance in Hades of getting anything done. And they identify 3 things that are essential, what they call preconditions. And of course, this would beg for a PowerPoint, but I'm not smart enough to do that. So what are those? And so, I think they got all three of these are right. I think they missed 2, but you can make that decision. First of all, there has to be a sense of urgency. If you've studied the Cotter School, the Harvard School, John Cotter and others about change, you know this is the single most fundamental. Somebody's got to get their pants on fire about it. If this issue is not driving people to do something, you're not going to get anything done around it. In fact, one of the first things that really smart leaders do, and you'll figure a way to do this, is you have to figure out a way to sell the problem before you start selling the solution. It's counterintuitive, but if people don't know what the problem is, and I mean with some specificity, everybody knows, yeah, we got a problem with homelessness. Or, yeah, we got a problem with education. No, you've got to be able to sell that problem in a way that people think you can, then you can move to do something about it. And that requires building a fire under people of like-minded people. It involves creating some distasis, being a disruptive agent in many cases, or just finding the right people to get upset about something, in a positive way, if I can say all that in one sentence. So how do you create a sense of urgency? And when we work with clients, and you're going to have a chance as a team to think through this, how would we do that? You don't have to have the exact issue yet, but creating a sense of urgency, what are some things that we can do to call attention? Like if it's putting somebody on a pole 25 feet above the ground, what is the urgency for anybody to do anything about that? Well, he's going to die up there because we didn't give him a diaper. And so if we don't raise this money in, 4 hours, he's going to freeze it. This is Florida, you don't freeze it. So you got to come up with something. Do what?
The coldest day of the year.
Was it really?
It was under 30.
Seriously? I didn't even know it got that cold down here. So most people were out tending to their oranges then to make sure that the orchards or whatever, oranges grow groves, don't they? To make sure they were putting heaters, they could care less about. That's why you raised $75,000. All right, so creating a sense of urgency. How could you do that? Second thing is you've got to have resources. Well, and the truth of the matter is, you've got the resources. How much money is coming into your communities from Congress, from some of the COVID support and stuff like that? Do you know?
Not enough.
Well, I know that is the answer now, but how much? Do you know? Find out. Because money's there, and it's got to be spent, and you need to get your fork in the meat somehow on this. In Orlando, it was over $200 million, and so there's a lot of this money that's floating around out there right now. There are resources right now, but also it's identifying the resources and connecting them up. It's like Tracy talked about in her collaborative effort, combining those resources then, so you got a little something here, a little something here. In fact, I'll talk about it in the morning, but sometimes we go out and we try to recreate something we've already got it. It's a matter of building a coalition of the people that already are at work in this area. In fact, if, in your homeless, I just picked that, you know, in my own living room, dining room, I put people from 7 different agencies in Columbia, South Carolina that are all working with the homeless. They can't talk to each other because they're all trying to get at the same volunteer pool, the same money, the same, even though they feel like they're on the same mission. There's no coordination or collaboration around there. But you, for crying out loud. I mean, just, yeah, I mean, I'm going to start all over. So there were some things on the, and then the last thing is, who are the champions? Now, part of the effort, part of why we put this little list of, you know, with spaces to fill in, and many of you went well beyond that, and you did it county by county, or east and west, is some of those folks are champions, will be champions. And the champion are the people that really are determined that something be done about something. They kind of get up every day thinking about this issue. You know, it's not just an item on an agenda at a meeting, but they really begin to own it. And part of the discovery process is you may identify some champions. It may be you, but it may not be you. You may not be a champion. In fact, what we're thinking, because this is where I think there are 2 other categories that they need to be thinking about. Somebody's got to call the party, like I say. Is that convene or whatever? I don't know how you spell it. Y'all do. Who can put rear ends in the chair around the table? That's the people that can call the party. And it may be the mayor. It may be a city council person. They can put people in the room, but they're not the champion. I think Stanford assumed that this was part of this because they're off to 13 other meetings tomorrow, but because of their position or their influence or their relationships, the chips they have with folks, they can get people to the table. Now, what I've tried to persuade the Salvation Army is that because of your long history of being a servant and a provider in the community, and that you are very well respected, and that you have the capacity to serve in this way, you may also have some championships of it and all this, but I think you can call the party. That's what started this whole Community Impact Accelerator in your group, when we just started talking about that in officers' councils like February or whatever, a year ago. January. Well, it was February before I thought of what I should have said. You know, I give the best talks generally on the plane on the way home. So, anyway, were you there? You really meant a lot to me. So figure out in that crowd, feistiness is not something we invite. You know, just sit there and take this. Don't push back. And, you know, don't engage. We're just trying to get through this meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Let's finish up.
You know, that's a mouth moving mess. And I was trying to say something really critical.
Number 5.
Thank you. Let's just, hello, would you like to nominate the word here before I move forward? I honestly, and this is what we're trying to do with this, we think too that it's important to have a coach. Or, you know, in some places I would call this is someone who can help frame the conversation. Because what happens is, just like with the homeless, the 7 different groups in my city, somebody from outside all those organizations sometimes has to be the one to say, okay, we've heard from you, now let's hear from Frank, you know, or whatever, just to help shape the conversation. Because otherwise, now this is the role we're trying to play with you, and we're glad to do it. But in other cities, it could be that you're going to be in you may be positioned on down the road after your own experience to actually begin to coach some of your other communities and stuff like that. That would be a dream of ours, that you could actually replicate not exactly your experience, like Glenn was saying, but the processes, and then you'd be able to bring some peer mentoring to bear. Now this is what, like I say, the Stanford folks call, just preconditions. Don't get out of the box. Don't start down the road until you make sure you've got this in hand. This is critical. Okay, now I'm through talking. What do you want to ask about? Or say, I wish you had said that, or what do you mean by that? I mean, any fool can see this is right. And I did. Did what now? Yeah.
Very intimidating.
That was my goal. I did pretty good. Yeah. And obviously I pretty well nailed it. So there's no real need for discussion or questions.
I do have you recorded though, just for the record.
Oh no! Then we're going to throw you out.
So is there a book or resources you recommend on what you're talking about?
Thank you. It's a good question. If you'll go to SSIR, that stands for Stanford Social Innovation Review, and .org, I guess. If that doesn't work, .com, whatever, .edu, whatever. This is the main thing right here. Just use these initials, and what you'll find is one of their free blogs. Now they're going to ask you to join up. I don't think it's worth it. I mean, don't really. It's not worth it to join. But go to their free blogs in there, and you can actually read what they said about this. Probably 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
When they first started creating this language for those people who are involved in the city transportation.
You can also do a Google search on collective impact.
Yeah.
If you do that, you'll get directed to articles in the Stanford Social Innovation Review.
And we'll bring you over the course of our time together from that what I think that you're going to. It's Angela, Commissioner Angela. Everybody's got to have a title here. I mean, we might as well elevate you to whatever's beyond general. What would that be, Commodore or? Right. That's fun. All right. So there you go. Good question. Anybody else? Well, I want you to, I'm sorry, my body language said anybody else, and I was through with you. Anybody else? On this stuff.
Reggie, I just wanted to.
Thank you, Glenn. Now, somebody.
Thank you. Sometimes people add on the preconditions, they've added in pre-existing network. Is that something that is not critical? What do you think of that? Trying to identify pre-existing networks?
I would do that under their next one they call conditions.
Okay.
Not preconditions.
Yeah.
But although, I mean, obviously, if there are it would be an area of exploration right here.
Right.
Are there people already working in this space? Do we have, that would be fine. It's going to work both places.
Okay.
So pre-existing networks, that's too many letters for me. I'm not paid that.
Reggie, if we can't identify those 5 things clearly as preconditions, is it an indication that we're looking at the wrong issue, or?
Not necessarily. Well, first of all, yes, I should say yes, but not necessarily. I mean, so I don't know which one. It could just be that there's more work to be done. I find, honestly, that a lot of folks rush out thinking that everyone's sold on it, for instance. Mm-hmm. They may have the exact right issue, but they just haven't built the fire big enough on the side of the mountain to get people's attention. I mean, you've got to prime the pump. I mean, there are things you've got to do to get people to come around to stuff that really matters. And this is a dilemma we've got in our country right now. We don't know what problem we're trying to solve. I mean, we've got a whole list of problems we think, and that's the problem. There's no, like, we're gonna put, you know, we're gonna put a man on the moon, you know, whatever. That's very specific, that's achievable, we know it's a, but now there's no consensus around what it is we're trying to get done, and that's to our detriment. There are reasons behind that. I'm not trying to turn this into a political seminar, but that's the only urgency right now is to vilify people that don't agree with what.
So Reggie, when you say this is really important. You're talking, first of all, at a national level where we don't have much agreement in our country around some things. However, we are finding that in local communities, people have great clarity around wanting to make sure kids get an education, wanting to make sure that people have a roof over their head. You know, the local communities have a greater sense of urgency,
Yes.
and the question is, do we put moral blame on people who don't have those things, rather than saying, this isn't a moral, an immorality issue, this is an issue of care and compassion, you know, right?
Well, it is because care and compassion, but frankly, with this, it's a leadership issue.
Right.
I mean, it's you know, have you thought through? And I'm going to give you a chance to actually work on this. You know, have we thought through what it would require us to do in order to bring that in? But you are right. The energy for social innovation has shifted from a national level, but there's because it's gotten so big, people can't feel like they can't touch that anymore. It's just too big, not just too big to fail, too big to fix. And that's the sense of folks. I'm not saying that's the sense, but you get the more local you get,
Right.
the more energy you find because people believe we can change something here.
Right.
And there's a lot of pent-up frustration of people wanting to do something that matters, that if you can tap into, then you've got energy to power this whole subject. Very important. Good point. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now, in this definition of urgency, I want to make sure I understand,
Okay?
and I understand from the pump. Are you trying to elicit passionate responses from people so that it becomes an issue for them?
Yes.
Or that they see the issue from your space? I'll give you an example. In anti-human trafficking, we did we held up picket signs all over Tallahassee, and I did some pretty explicit ones, like, you know, I can't even explain it. Human trafficking is not sexy, and it was a group of children and everything. So I got some pushback from that, because there are some people that want to identify human trafficking as butterflies and rainbows and recovery and everything, but that was not my goal. My goal was to elicit a response.
Yeah.
And have people start thinking about it.
Yeah.
So is that what you're talking about when you have something that you know that needs to be worked on, is that you need to elicit that urgency and passion?
As a matter, let me see if I can reframe it, because I don't want to say no, because I'm never supposed to say no to someone that asks a question.
It's okay, I'm fine with that.
No, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
That's fine.
The very fact that you got feedback at that level is a sign of success. Right. People work, if your goal was to punch through the haze of all messages that people were getting and get them to pay attention to something, then, you know, that could be a measure of success for you that you got pushed, because that, you got it on people's screen. Now, do we insist that people, is it a measure of success that everyone have the same level of passion? To your question now, no. Because you're still going to have varying levels of passion. There are going to be people who say, well, you know, that, yeah, I know that's an issue that doesn't float by. Here, I'll write you a check, but that's not, I'm not going to work it, you know, or whatever. So it's not that you're trying to bring them to a certain level of boil. It's just that you're trying to galvanize enough sense of urgency around it that people would participate at some level to help alleviate that issue or target that issue. Does that make sense? Because if you use the standard or the scorecard, we get everybody to the same level of passion. I think that's not achievable.
Oh, I agree, but I mean, is that kind of what the idea is something that will make them see the urgency, whether or not they make that their top priority or their top,
Right, you want to get it on their screen.
and just get them to the table.
Right, you want to sell the product.
Okay.
So then now they understand we got a problem. It's not rainbows. It's these kids are in trouble, or these women or whatever. Now, they're different, and you can think you're selling urgency. I was telling Glenn last night, I was asked to speak at this, I won't say where or when, but this big 1,500 people on sex trafficking, human trafficking. And I spoke at the plenary, but earlier in the afternoon, I had a meeting with the pastors, and the sponsor of the event chose that time to talk about addiction to pornography, and to challenge all the pastors with because when, citing all this stuff and I thought that was not a great way to increase urgency about human trafficking, to confront pastors about their addiction to pornography, or men in general. I mean, that was not a smart move, because suddenly we weren't partnering. Now we're coming at you. It was kind of like the bait and switch, like you get the invitation to dinner and you think it's going to be a social event, you get there and they're selling firearms, and you go, wait a minute, somebody, so you don't want to do that. That's not what you're going to do. I do want you to wrestle a little bit. That may be the wrong word. Glenn used the word exercise. We're trying to up this, create urgency. I want you to go fight it out with each other. Once again, we have a template for you. You have an individual template because we are just that kind of people. And so you can record your own events. But we're taking these top three, because I'm just urgency, resources, and champions, and think about ways that you could accelerate that in your community. Now, it may be specific to your issue. If you want to go that route, you can, but you may not have an issue yet. But think about ways that you could get any issue pushed through to break through the conversation and just the haze and get people's attention. Okay, and we've got. Let's see how long we have for this. Excuse me. Let's take about 30 minutes, and I'll check on you, and then we'll see how you're doing, and then we'll report out, because we need to learn from each other over this issue. Okay, got it? Go for it. And one of these large templates is on your table. How you doing, Ron? Don't worry. We need to straighten down some.
I was gonna say, wow. Oh, they're going off the grid.
You just told me about it. No, that's why. You do need a policy. They don't even worry about it. They will worry about it. We don't have that same. They are.
So they value that. And I'm going to ask you if we can get over it. Okay.
That's what we have to do. We have to make sure that they do their job. And then once I find out, then I'll let them know, this is what we got out of it.
That's a good conversation.
That's why I wrote it.
Is this camera always recording?
Well, because